A really good rule of thumb is if you can't picture the scene clearly in your own mind based simply off the words on the page, then your readers won't be able to either. We all have images in our minds about what our characters look like and the world around them, even if it is our world. But you need to remind yourself that your readers won't necessarily have that same image, and you can't assume what they're thinking. So if you want them to be in sync with you, you need to give them that information. A really common mistake that a lot of authors make is to list descriptors. For example, obviously this is super basic what I'm about to say, but it's dark and windy out. Tenley is cold. Her hair is brown and she has blue eyes. Nobody wants to read that. Not to be harsh, but like it's so boring, right? Nobody wants to read a list of items. So instead of listing them, think about how your main character's actions can be used to describe what's happening. So one of my favorite lines ever is from Commonwealth by Anne Patchett. The line is, she could feel her own bitterness as the frozen air did battle with her coat. And it's like the most perfect line, in my opinion. It is short, but it tells you everything you need to know. So instead of simply writing, she felt bitter, she wrapped her coat around her to block out the wind, Patchett turned the wind into a battle. So we can clearly picture the wind now trying to whip under the main character's coat. We know how she's feeling, how it aligns with the weather. So the bitter feelings, bitter air. It's also proof, in my opinion, that the best use of language is often in the shortest lines. It does not have to be lengthy descriptions. You can write short sentences. It can be brief and still have this type of impact. And I feel that this shows that perfectly.
So here is an example of a scene that I think is bogged down by listing items. So we have a shed sat to the right of the rental cottage. It had seen better days. At least 8 shingles were missing, making ugly brown holes in the otherwise blue building. In front of the little path was a large green pine full of birds singing in the branches. Now, this paragraph isn't horrible, but I've highlighted and read some of the things that we see a lot of times with newer authors or first drafts that need to be cut out or put in a more interesting way. Things like color direction, the number of things. You might have this perfect image in your mind of this scene, and you want the reader to know that the shed is to the right of the cottage. But unless that plays an actual role in your story, there's a better way to say that they're next to each other. For example, a shed nestled close to the rental cottage, like 2 friends bound in quiet companionship. There's one of our figurative languages. Time had worried at the building, stripping its shingles and leaving the air heavy with the scent of damp timber. Before them, a pine stood watch, its branches alive with birdsong. Hopefully, in the second paragraph, you start to actually feel what the setting is. It didn't matter that the shed was to the right or the left of the cottage. What matters is their close proximity, that they're standing together through time, that they're weathering a storm. We have the smell of damp wood and an old tree keeping watch, giving the image sort of an eerier feel to it. And the main thing I want to show here that sounds a bit counterintuitive, that Margie did touch on, is that the most important thing to keep in mind with figurative language and lush descriptions is that they are about careful word choice, not about the quantity of the things that you're describing. You don't want to get so literal and detailed that you overwhelm your reader and they can't even picture the scene anymore because you've told them, that Henry is over here, Jake's over there, then Henry's wearing blue, and suddenly they're glossing over your paragraph because they can't keep track of all of the things that you're describing. So here's another kind of character introduction, because this is one of the places I think that we fall into the habit of just listing what our characters look like because it feels so important to us that you know exactly the character that we have in our mind. But there are, again, better ways than just listing the exact things. So Isaiah Tremblay leaned against a pillar beneath the chandelier. The light reflected off the bar as he looked up at the shelves, deciding what to order. He wore a green jacket over a brown sweater and trousers. His black hair was slicked back, and he had round glasses and a trimmed beard. I could only see his profile, but even his nose looked cute from here. Again, it's not a horrible paragraph, but it is a list that's just hitting all of the physical attributes that you want the reader to know. And it's a little dry, and it lacks, and this is probably the most important thing, it lacks Isaiah's personality, and it lacks the personality of the narrator. So I have in red here some of the things that I either cut out or can be changed over to something more interesting. The word beneath, for example. If you say that there's a chandelier, most people have already assumed that the chandelier is on the ceiling, so the character is probably beneath it. You don't have to tell us that. What's more interesting is if you say that Isaiah is bathed in jade-studded chandelier light. That gives a vibe to the entire room. Again, instead of saying a green jacket and brown sweater and trousers, which does tell you a little bit about him in terms of what he's wearing, but you can say something like, he stepped off the page of a style magazine. Suddenly we know that he's not just wearing something he got from Walmart, he's interested in his own appearance and he's looking really nice. Also using words like caramel trousers or camel trousers, things like that. A cable knit sweater, a specific type of sweater, makes it a bit more interesting. And then in my last line here, I give the narrator personality in terms of how she's seeing him. He stares at the top shelf of the bar, profile in shadow, but damn, even from this angle, the curve of his nose is sublime. So not only are we describing the character that we're seeing, we're also giving the main character whose point of view it is a little bit of personality too.